Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Coco and Daltz. I'm not Daltz.
I'm not Coco.
That was fast.
I'm not Coco.
There we go, that's what I'm used to. And today we have a very special episode for you, although they're all special episodes.
Oh, they're really all special.
They're all like our children. We love them all
Equally. Yes. All 40 episodes. This is number 40.
This is number 40. Our podcast is officially middle-aged.
The podcast is exactly 10 years more than your age.
I think our listener will know that that's not true because I gave up my real age in our last episode, which we talked about the B-52s in. So
and it was hugely popular.
It is hugely popular. It's actually done our best numbers basically all year.
Right.
Aside from when we reviewed Avengers Endgame. So if you haven't listened to either one of those episodes, please...
What's the matter with you?
Well, I want people to actually like us.
You're not...
And,
okay.
Yeah. So if you haven't listened to those episodes, please... go back and download them on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Or cocoanddalts.com.
That's right. Or our Facebook page.
Right.
Coco and Daltz. But this is not... That normally comes at the end of the episode.
We did this backwards. We're mixing it up here. We're throwing things around for you people.
This is the Memento episode where we start at the end.
You have to stitch it together.
Right. So our 40th episode is a very special episode.
Oh, it is.
We're reviewing Ad Astra, starring Brad Pitt and Tommy Lee Jones, Liv
Missouri's
Tyler.
Brad Pitt.
Missouri's Brad Pitt. He actually went to a high school that was a rival of my high school.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I never told you about that before?
Well, probably, but tell the listeners.
They don't care.
No, they do.
No, they really don't.
What was the nickname of your high school?
So my high school was Jefferson City High School. We were the Jaybirds. And he grew up in Springfield, and he went to Springfield Kickapoo. I don't know what their mascot was, but his...
I thought Kickapoo was the mascot.
No, I think the high school was actually Kickapoo. There is a high school in Columbia, Missouri called...
1, 2, Kickapoo.
That's probably what it went like.
Right.
There is a high school in Columbia, Missouri, 30 miles north of Jeff City, and their mascot is the Cupie, like the actual Cupie doll. And they tried to butch it up and call it Cupe Dog, but that didn't work. So
there's a lot going on there in that part of the country, I think.
So people are deleting this episode right now.
No, they're not.
So
this is insightful information. You have a connection with Brad Pitt.
I do have a connection with Brad Pitt, and not least of which is the fact that he was in the movie that we saw this weekend.
Yes.
In its second weekend of release. It opened on September 20th, my birthday.
Right.
It has currently
Which is a natural holiday, actually.
Totes.
Yeah.
It has currently made $35.5 million at the domestic box office, doing a bit better internationally, which Daltz and I are stunned by that it was only number 5 in its second weekend of wide release because we both loved it.
And this is an unusual fact in itself that we both went to a movie. I think we were going into this movie usually we go to a movie like an Avengers movie, a superhero movie, and you're like stoked. And I'm like, all right, let's do this thing. Or we're going to like a movie that's all about conversations. And
like
you're
three billboards, and I'm like, fine.
You're
whatever,
like, I'll go with it. It's got Missouri in the title.
Right.
I'll put up with it. And maybe you'll buy me some jujubes or something like that. Some vegan jujubes. And so one of us is just kind of going along for the ride. So I think in this one, it's fair to say, Coco, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were kind of both going into this going, all right, it's a hyped movie. It looked decent. I don't really have huge expectations, but I don't have low expectations either.
Right.
It's kind of like impress me. Yeah. Also, we wanted to go to the new theater layout near us in our small town in the Northeast here in Connecticut.
We finally got reclining seats at our theater.
And reserve seats. I don't know, this is going to challenge our double dipping, I think.
I think we're going to be able to find a way because the kids clearly don't care
who
are working there. But anyway, so we were both into it, but not super hyped.
Right.
And
we weren't lining up at midnight on Thursday to buy tickets for this.
Exactly, as evidenced by the fact that it took us until the second weekend of release to see it.
Right.
So, Daltz, I've already kind of spoiled it by telling people that we loved it. Tell me what you thought.
So, Brad Pitt is an astronaut in the near future. He is like Mr. Chill because apparently his resting heart rate is 14 or something like that.
It was 47, which as somebody who works in the fitness industry, I was like, holy crap, is he alive?
You're right.
I mean, it's part of the character. It keeps him alive, but...
He's Dr. Chill. He's Mr. Cool. He's like totes McGroobs on an even keel the entire time. And you can barely get a rise out of this guy.
He's very stoic.
So it's almost in some ways very good for Brad Pitt's acting style because he doesn't really need to act here. He just needs to just lay low and look over and say, there seems to be some guys wanting to shoot me. But he doesn't get like all freaked out and he doesn't have to be like bug eyes or anything like that. So very good here for that. So where I'm going with this is he's searching for his dad.
Tommy Lee Jones.
Tommy Lee Jones. When you think of Brad Pitt's dad, who's the first person that comes to mind? It's like, who looks the most like Brad Pitt? I know, Tommy Lee Jones.
Definitely.
Because he has one eyebrow. And
he's a Gallagher brother.
He's a fantastic actor. So Tommy Lee Jones' character is gone a little bit loopy and is... we assume he's gone loopy.
As he should, because he left for a Neptune expedition like 30 years earlier.
Right.
And never came back. So,
after having previously been to Saturn and been to Jupiter and come back.
Not Uranus. I was extremely unhappy there were no Uranus jokes in this
movie.
movie.
I think they were like, so in the pitch room, they're probably like, okay, it can't be Pluto because Pluto's not a star or it's not a planet anymore, so we can't do that. What's the farthest one out? And then somebody's like, Uranus! And it's like, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to go to Uranus. Because every time somebody will say, oh no, there's disaster looming and it's coming in from Uranus.
Yeah.
Then
there's antimatter flooding, the solar system from Uranus.
The disaster, it could destroy the entire existence as we know it because it's coming from Uranus. So now that we got that juvenile stuff out of the way, Tommy Lee Jones, Neptune, antimatter is disrupting the entire universe.
Yeah,
it could end up destroying everything as we know it.
Basically, the plot is that Brad Pitt has followed in his dad's footsteps as an astronaut, and there's antimatter flooding the solar system.
Not from Uranus.
And the latter-day NASA, known as Space Command, I believe.
But it was a corporate space command.
Yeah.
It was more like a
Virgin Atlantic.
Yeah, exactly.
They tell Brad Pitt that his dad, even though they lost communication with him and the official line is that he's deceased, they don't believe that he's deceased. They believe that the antimatter is coming from his spaceship. And so Brad Pitt is sent on an expedition to Mars to send a message to his dad just saying, hey, please stop sending antimatter out in the solar system because that could kill people, and that's bad.
If Brad Pitt's character was Canadian in this, he'd be like, oh, gee, stop doing that, hey, Dad? What are you doing, Dad?
Oh, with the antimatter,
with the antimatter. Like, you're going to destroy the whole existence, eh?
And then Brad Pitt gets to Mars, and he sends messages out every day for like a week, and the day that he goes rogue and does his own thing and doesn't follow the script, that's the day it's heavily implied that they receive a message in return. Mm-hmm. And then he decides he's got to go to Neptune and find his dad. There's a spaceship heading there with a nuke to nuke the spaceship to get rid of the antimatter so it can't destroy the universe. He takes over the spaceship and heads to Neptune. So that's not a nutshell of the plot.
That's the movie right there.
That's the movie. I didn't say how it ends, though. So.
No, and it's actually, so the journey is this movie, obviously. The ending, I think you could probably guess what happens. You think Brad Pitt's going to be in a movie where he's not the hero, like he's going to be a failed hero?
Well, do we want to talk about other stuff and then circle back to the ending?
So other stuff is that the journey itself is very interesting. So they go to the moon, and then they go from the moon to Mars, and then from Mars they shoot like a rocket out into the solar system. This is an homage to many different science fiction movies. So there's the obvious right off the top is 2001: A Space Odyssey. A lot of the shots are very dramatically from the distance. You're seeing a lot of open space. You're seeing the space stations, and you're seeing the spacecraft in the distance. So back in the day when it was a Stanley Kubrick production for 2001, a lot of that had to do with mood, obviously, but a lot of it had to do with the special effects at the time, which were very rudimentary. And so in order for you not to see the fishing line holding up the 2001 Space Odyssey guys.
Like the USS Enterprise.
Right. It's like wobbles a little bit. It's like, oh, wait a minute. So that's in the movie, obviously. There's a scene where they get called sort of off track when they're going to Mars, and the pilot says, we got to answer this SOS. This is a requirement that we must do, and they do that. And so, not spoiling too much of it, but that's totally an homage to Alien. And then you've got another homage when they're on Mars, and there's a lot of lighting going on, a lot of different effects that is completely an homage to Blade Runner. Now, when I say all this, it sounds like, well, they're copying these movies, and why can't they have original thoughts and original scenes and everything like that? But it doesn't come across that way. It comes across as this is just a movie. But if you've seen these other movies, you can notice these touch points along the way. So it's almost like a tribute. It's not necessarily like an homage, but it's also not a lazy kind of filmmaking, where it's like, oh, I can't think of an idea, so let's copy 2001.
Let's remake The Lion King.
Right. 4 times.
Right.
And dominate the box office.
There was also, they also didn't just pay homage to science fiction movies. There was a scene on the moon where they were being chased, and the car,
landers,
the lunar
landers,
lander that Brad Pitt was in, went off the edge of a crater, and that totally was like the end of Thelma and Louise, where they drive their car off the Grand Canyon. That is totally not a spoiler. That's a 40-year-old movie. Be quiet. So, yeah. So that it wasn't just science fiction movies that got homaged, to borrow a Beyonce term.
Well, and one of the things I really liked about this, so this being a science fiction movie, this was the same thing as when I went to see Blade Runner 2049. Is that the sound was fantastic.
As were the actual effects themselves.
The special effects were amazing.
There was not a single time where I was like, oh, that's clearly a green screen.
Right. I could see the strings.
Right, exactly. Like, it was really fantastic.
Yeah, it was all the way done.
You've got your Oscar winner for special effects right here, people.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Coco and Daltz called it after every other major reviewer, but we still called it.
Yeah,
so.
and also one of the things I really liked about the special effects were the scenes in space. So when you go to some movies and things happen in space that clearly scientifically will not happen, like fire or sound. They're not happening in space because it's a vacuum. There's nothing out there. In this movie,
no one can hear you scream.
Right. That's a great line. We should copyright that.
Yeah.
In the podcast, no one can hear you. Podcast. No, maybe not.
Our listener.
Right.
Can.
Our one listener. So what I really appreciated about the special effects around Ad Astra was the realism, was the fact that they seem to pay attention to the science. Mm-hmm. So when something happens in space, when there's a lunar landing or lunar car chase, of course there's a car chase on the moon. Why?
Right.
Why
not?
Yeah, it's Hollywood. A lot of the things happen there, and there's a shootout, but you don't really hear the shots. You feel the shots. Mm-hmm. You feel the things being thumped. You feel the lunar cars getting hit. Mm-hmm. You don't actually hear the pew 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 pew. There's none of that stuff going on in this movie. It's actual science, it seems like, anyway, from a layman's perspective. Mm-hmm. So I was really impressed with that. You more feel the damage in space rather than hear it. And that was really impressive to me. It was just a lot of thumping and a lot of muffled sounds and things like that in space, and there weren't a lot of screams, and there's a lot of dramatic action. So you have to pay attention. You can't be, in some of these blockbusters, you have to really be led down the path. It's like, oh, this must be a big deal, and then there's a loud explosion. Well, there's no loudness in this movie, and that's part of the charm of it, I think.
Right, and I think two things there. I think you had to have like the car chase and the opening scene of him like falling off the Space Needle thing, because it's a very quiet movie, literally and figuratively, because it's about one man's journey, although you can extrapolate that to all of humanity. Like, what am I going to be? Am I going to stay here, or am I going to grow? And he doesn't, you kind of, and this is kind of probably too early to talk about this, but I said we were going to circle back to the ending. Like, it's really not a movie where you're sure it's going to have a happy ending. Like, it's not a movie that sets up for like Brad Pitt and Tommy Lee Jones at the end to be like father, son, and they embrace, and then they ride the nuclear blast back to Earth, and they return as like heroes
with ticker tape parades and such like.
Right, like you don't know how it's gonna go. Like, maybe.
Well, I think we know that there's going to be a successful ending. It's just how we get there.
Yeah, or maybe what do you even define as successful?
Right. I
Also.
think so. The world is going to be, the Earth, the universe is going to be saved. I don't think there's any question about that. It's just a matter of, does Brad Pitt survive?
Right.
Does Tommy Lee
Right.
Jones survive? Do they come back together? What's
Right.
happening there? Like that's to me the mystery, but I don't think there's any question that it'll be a happy Hollywood ending.
So it's like one man's internal struggle.
Right.
Like, does he stay? And Brad Pitt's talked about this too. Like, it's a lot about toxic masculinity. And
Yep.
do you continue?
Says a guy who was in a movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where he bashes a woman's face in on the fireplace mantle.
Right. Which he and his people are trying to gin up Oscar talk for this year. And they seem to be focusing on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But I liked this one better. I
Me
liked
too.
the character better. I like the movie better.
Well,
Like,
everybody knows how I feel about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
right. Like this movie didn't
It
have
was
any of
crap.
like Tarantino's like Tarantino-ness to overcome. Like it was just really.
It was the movie.
And I think I like, Brad Pitt 2.0, like 90s Brad Pitt, like everybody. Like this is also mirroring everybody's kind of journey from youth to adulthood. Like 90s Brad Pitt, he's young, he's hot, he's fiery, he's headstrong.
He's perhaps one-dimensional.
Right. He's in Fight Club, he's in Seven, he's in Legends of the Fall. Like he's doing, a lot of
Pretty boy stuff.
pretty boy stuff. And his last few movies, this one, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there was another one I can't think of the name of off the top of my head, but he's kind of 12 Years a Slave. He's kind of settled
I was
into
going to say Toy Story 4.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
He's kind of settled into like middle-aged, kind of like resignation, just
Trying to be a bit more of a thespian, too.
yeah, trying to be more of a thespian, but just kind of how we all get here. Like, wow, this is my life.
Right.
And, you're not young and idealistic and ready to take on the world anymore. You're more of a realist, and maybe you're depressed about that or not. But I kind of, he was the focus of the movie.
Yes.
Like the movie definitely was him.
Yeah. And he carried it.
He carried it very well. I read a review after we saw the movie where they said there's all these supporting actors who are just basically completely wasted. And I'm like, because it's not their movie.
Right.
It's his
Right.
movie. It's all about his journey
Right.
that you can extrapolate to humanity as a whole.
Or
But
you can even extrapolate to religious overtones. I mean, like the son seeking the father. And the son seeking the father in the heavens. Like it's pretty obvious in on some levels, and the father in the heavens is perhaps casting doom down upon humanity,
Right.
and the son goes to counter that.
Tommy Lee Jones is Old Testament God.
Right.
And Brad Pitt is Jesus.
Right. Like, it's kind of obvious in some ways. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but this is that kind of movie where you can read many things into it, whether that was intended or not. I'm not saying that's on the same level as the original Blade Runner, but that's where Blade Runner was. Is that all this subtext in Blade Runner that you could interpret any way you wanted to. And it was up to the viewer. And this is that kind of movie where you can go into it and you can just get a thrill ride. It's like, oh, this is a yeehaw space cowboy movie, and everybody's going to die, and there's going to be floating corpses in the airlock and angry monkeys and all that sort of stuff. You can enjoy it on that level, but you can also enjoy it at a different level. Whereas like the meaning of life, not to be too grippy and deep, but the meaning of life, the meaning of existence. So I think this was a great movie. I really enjoyed it. And we're going to go see it again, probably. That's
yeah.
how much we liked it, right?
Yeah, we definitely liked it. So I know there was like a whole lot of other stuff that we talked about that we wanted to talk about with this movie.
We can still do that.
Okay. Keep going then.
Well, so Brad Pitt's performance
Yes.
was very good, was very subtle.
If he's going to get nominated for something, I hope it's this.
Yes. It can't be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because he was kind of like Brad Pitt in that movie. You know what I mean? Like I didn't see him doing anything. Not that I hang around with him and drink beers with him in Missouri or anything like that. But
Please invite me if you do.
wait a minute.
That'd be awesome.
But if he's actually very mellow in this. Very
Yeah.
You would think if it was somebody who couldn't act, you'd be like, oh well, they made them do this so that they didn't have to act. But he's acting in this, and and you can feel it, and not in an obvious way, but in a subtle, reserved kind of way. And the way that his character is built, he has to do that because he's doing a lot of the voiceover in the story.
Yeah.
He's got a wife that he leaves behind, so there's a lot of emotion that he has to pull out there, but it's very subtle. And I think his very nuanced. I don't use that word very often when we're talking about performances in movies because there's not a lot of nuance left in movies. But this was very much a nuanced performance by him.
Yeah, I agree.
What did you think of Tommy Lee Jones in this movie?
I mean, he was Tommy Lee Jones.
Right.
He was
good.
He was a curmudgeon. He was fine. I didn't love him. I didn't hate him.
Was there anybody you would want to see do that part instead?
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing is that you think, well, maybe like Redford, since Brad Pitt was called the young Redford back in the 90s.
And they that would be...
And they look alike. And
be a better fit,
but then
visually.
Then you're like, I mean, not to take anything away from Redford's like acting skills, but the character of Tommy Lee Jones was not a loving father who gave up his family for the greater good.
Right.
He wasn't just like, I don't want to leave my wife and my child, but this mission could help humanity. I'm going to do it. He flat out said to Brad Pitt when, spoiler alert, Brad Pitt finds Tommy Lee Jones on the abandoned spaceship by Neptune. He's like, I never loved you or your mother. So maybe it would have had a little more impact coming from somebody like Redford who could maybe imbue that character with more humanity, but then at the same time it's like, but does that character need to be imbued with more humanity, or do you just need somebody like Tommy Lee Jones to come in there and like flip him the bird and then at the end be like, just let me drift off into space, I don't want to come back with you, and
see, I think you need a little level of unhinged in that character, right? Like Tommy Lee Jones is a fantastic actor, Robert Redford's a fantastic actor, but I don't really think unhinged when I think Robert Redford.
Right, totally.
So you're looking at like somebody like maybe a Frank Langella or somebody like that, so like an older character, somebody who's developed into a character actor, like that kind of thing. But I still think Tommy Lee Jones was great. I was wondering if you thought he was great, but I can't see anybody else in that role really.
Yeah.
Because he played like I said, unhinged, but almost like the smoldering insanity under the surface, right? Like it's just something's going to go wrong there, and you buy it with Tommy Lee Jones. And maybe that's because of who Tommy Lee Jones is,
right?
Like maybe it's Billy Bob Thornton,
right?
In 5 years or 10
years. Get Angelina's ex-husbands on screen together.
Angelina's ex-husband as Brad Pitt's dad.
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
How amazing would that be? Hollywood,
call us.
Right. We've got some casting decisions that we can run by you.
Right. We have ideas that aren't, let's remake The Lion King. Which, by the way, Disney Plus we're totally subscribing to. Just again. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that was Tommy Lee Jones was great. So I don't really have any qualms with that. Of
all the non-Brad Pitt characters, he had the most to work with.
It's always better and easier, I think, to be a villain, right? Or to be somebody who's on the edge, like we're talking about Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. And the Joker is going to continue to be an interesting character no matter who plays him, I think. So you've got Jack Nicholson. Back in the beginning. Ledger. Yeah. You had Heath Ledger, who won an Oscar for it and was fantastic. And really, how do you step into those shoes? Well, it's the Joker. Right. So you get somebody else to play the Joker. And apparently Joaquin Phoenix is fantastic in that role as well. So I think it's so much easier, and this is all relative because I'm not an actor, so I'm not calling out people on their performance because I don't know what I'm doing in that regard. But as far as watching it, it's always easier to be the unhinged character or the character who's in 25% of the movie or 15% of the movie, whereas Brad Pitt was in a lot of this movie. Yeah, this was Brad Pitt's movie from beginning to end. Yeah, it was his vehicle. Yeah, he was, without him, I mean, there was no other person who that movie could have focused on besides that character. This was very much his journey from the darkness to the light. Look at you. The darkness to the light. And it was like the light to the darkness and to the light. It was a very Heart of Darkness movie too. Right. It was a Heart of Darkness movie. Yeah, definitely. You've got that internal struggle. So. Well, and there was a lot of that. There have been comparisons to Apocalypse Now, right? Because of that journey of the young sort of. Even though Charlie Sheen wasn't Marlon Brando's son in that movie, there was a lot of that father-like figure in Marlon Brando. And then we get there, and Marlon Brando, of course, talk about a character that you buy being unhinged. An actor presenting that, like Marlon Brando was unhinged in that movie. I mean, a lot of that dialogue he did was improv, right? So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did a lot of that stuff just off the top of his head, and they clipped Francis Ford Coppola used whatever he wanted to use out of it. So that's a really good comparison for Apocalypse Now. And I think that this movie, not overstating it, because Apocalypse Now was definitely an anti-war movie and there was definitely message there. This one doesn't have that kind of depth, I don't think, but it's still a very deep movie. It doesn't have a message really to me. I mean, there might be some religious undertones like we talked about earlier. There might be some, we're going to screw the earth up if we're not careful, but it's not like on the same level with Apocalypse Now, which is very much an anti-war movie.
I can see that, but I do also think it was very much like I said, you've got Tommy Lee Jones as like the epitome of sort of toxic masculinity and the old ways of doing things. I mean, like even my dad's generation, like they didn't raise the kids. They weren't expected to raise the kids.
Shout out to Mr. Coco.
Not that I'm saying he did a bad job or anything, but just that was that generation. But now toxic masculinity hurts everybody, including men.
Well, men and women,
yeah, it hurts everybody. So, I think it was like a very universal kind of thing about, do we continue in the ways that we've been doing things that have just completely screwed everything up? Or do we maybe start to see that there are better ways and
be open to new ideas?
And nothing, just be open and vulnerable, and a whole new world will open to you. And
Is this the first big blockbuster of the Me Too movement?
Oh, I don't know. There's probably been others. I wouldn't call this Me Too though.
Well, okay. I thought that's where you're going though with toxic masculinity and that.
No, just toxic masculinity in terms of like boys can't cry, boys can't show emotion, stuff like that. Not
because Brad Pitt does not in this movie.
No,
there are some scenes where he verges on it.
Yeah, definitely. It's not really until the very end where he has a monologue about how he wants to be open and reconnect with his wife and experience things, because clearly he doesn't want to be his dad. He sees where that,
And he says as much in one of the voiceovers. He said, "I don't want to be my dad."
Right, exactly. So,
and yet he seeks him. And he risks his life to go get him, that sort of thing.
Well, as I think everybody would do with a parent who's absent or distant.
Right.
Literally and figuratively.
Right.
So
we've been fawning over this movie. Was there anything that you did not like about this movie, Coco?
Oh, I'll have to think. Why don't you go?
Well, I didn't like the angle from which we watched it.
Well, that was the angle that was available now that we have to reserve the seats, and that's nothing to do with the movie itself.
No,
so.
that was pretty much it. I mean, it was 2 hours long. I thought it was right.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it was too long. Didn't feel like it was too short. It felt like the right length.
Yeah.
Like I said, the sound was amazing. Like a lot of the peripheral stuff that you don't talk about in a review. Mm-hmm. It had an effect. Like it wasn't like there was at the end of the movie there was a bloopers reel or something like that.
That would be awesome.
With like Brad Pitt walks into the boom mic or something like that.
Right. Brad Pitt in his like astronaut diaper, like walking around the set.
So I was I can't really pick on anything obvious for this movie. And the dialogue was bang on. It seemed realistic. Like I said, the science was good. Mm-hmm. Special effects were fantastic. So I'd say this is a good movie to go see in the theater. Definitely. Don't wait for this one to come to Netflix or your local DVD Redbox or anything like that.
Right. Spend the $12.
Spend the $12 and go to see it in the movie because this is one of those. It gives me new hope and new. A new hope? Oh, not a new hope. No, not that. It gives me new hope about movies, like the studios are actually trying to get people into the theaters instead of just throwing out this stuff. It's like, okay, we'll make some money when it goes to streaming, our own personal streaming. So eventually every studio is going to have their own streaming system, then we're going to be messed up because we won't be able to watch like we have now Netflix and Amazon and a couple others, Hulu and stuff like that. So it gives me hope for the fact that studios are paying attention, and you still have to put on, or you still can put on a fantastic performance and a fantastic special effects package and everything like that. You can still generate and produce a movie that entertains in the theater.
Right, and that's why I'd give it an A for sure. And that's why I'm like, wow, I can't believe it's only made $35 million in 2 weeks. Like like I said at the beginning, it's doing much better internationally than domestically. But
Well, why do you think it's not doing well domestically?
I don't know.
U.S. domestically.
I don't know if it's. So we don't have TV. So I don't.
Yes, we do.
So I don't like watch a lot of TV. So I haven't seen any ads for it. So I don't know if it's the marketing, because it's not like a typical space movie.
Right.
You know, it's not.
There's not a lot of pew pew.
Right, exactly. It's not like those movies in the 90s, like with the asteroid with Bruce Willis going on it to blow it up, and Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler again.
Oh, wow.
Right, it's not
Look at
like
you.
Right, it wasn't some space cowboy adventure movie. It was a very, like I said, quiet inner journey thing. And so I don't know if maybe they just didn't know how to market it, or if people just don't want to see Brad Pitt, or
Well, they saw him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and they're like, that movie was a piece of crap. I'm not going to any other movies with anybody else in it. I'm not doing a Quentin Tarantino movie. I'm not doing a Brad Pitt movie. I'm not doing a Leonardo DiCaprio movie.
Which is really funny, because this is the other side of that coin. Like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, we said on the podcast, was like, make Hollywood great again. It was very much like holding on to the old ways, like the white man's grip on
The bad white.
right,
bad
exactly,
old
like
ways.
the bad old ways. And this one is more of, we need to evolve, we need to progress. Like his character in both movies is like, oh, oopsies, I just hit the mic. We talk with our hands a lot here, which you can't see because
we haven't gotten the video portion figured out yet.
Because we can't figure that out. So, well, I don't know. Like, I think Leonardo was more like toxic masculinity in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but they're very much flip movies. You know, one is, like I said, and the other is not. And so,
Well, you've got Brad Pitt doing sort of opposite movies, right? Like you've got him doing one that is just not, it's just kind of reprehensible in terms of the male characters in the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And then you've got him in this Ad Astra, which he's seeking his dad, and he's reinforcing that men should have emotions, and men should be receptive to new ideas and thinking out of the box and that sort of thing.
Feminism isn't just about promoting women. It's about everybody.
Right. It's about equality.
Being equal.
Yeah,
having all the same opportunities.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. I'm a feminist, but I'm an equalist. I mean, I don't even know if that's a thing. Well, you see, you're smarter than me. You came up with that word, but like
And this is after that gigantic freaking glass of wine that you poured me at dinner that I'm still working on. Did you just turn it off again? No. Okay.
So overall, the train wreck that is this podcast, let's bring it to a halt here. We're good with the movie. We like it. We recommend it. We think that it should win some Oscars come March or whenever the Oscars are.
It's definitely winning special effects for sure.
It's got to be cinematography. It's got to be special effects. It's got to be sound. It's got to be a lot of those things. I would even hazard a guess that the screenplay will get a shout out. I think it's James Gray was the director, and he had a part in the screenplay as well. One of the things that I was really impressed with this movie was it felt like a book.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
And with the narrative, with narration, I should say, with Brad Pitt reading the narration and sort of leading us along. That's usually an old trick by Hollywood, is like, oh, people aren't going to get it. We better put narration on there because, oh, golly, there's too many twists and turns.
Well, I will say I
don't know why that guy was from the South, but
I did really appreciate the fact that it seems like, so this was Brad Pitt's production company, Plan B, which he got in his divorce from Jennifer Aniston.
Oh, is that what happened?
I would say.
Also a burger establishment near us. Wonder if there's a connection.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I was going to say, wait, what? But now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So.
Not the divorce part.
I appreciate that he's making movies for grown-ups.
Yes.
Like, I say that about Clooney all the time. Like, whatever problems I have with, like, Clooney's personal life and the fame whoring thereof, like, I appreciate that he makes...
Well, Good Night and Good Luck was a very adult movie.
Yeah, he makes smart movies for grown-ups, and I feel like this is the direction that Brad Pitt has gone in as well.
You don't think that some of his old movies were for adults? Like Fight Club is a very adult movie.
Well, he didn't produce that, though, I don't think.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a lot of
like his
stuff,
choice. He chose to be in that movie.
Right, like Seven and Fight Club, like...
Those are adult
Yeah,
movies.
those are definitely adult movies.
Adult themes.
But I think he and Jennifer Aniston started Plan B when they were married, which was around like 2000, because that was like the hot gossip story when it happened, their wedding.
And you would know because you were in that world.
I did. I used to be a celebrity gossip columnist, people. So.
Is there such a thing as a former celebrity gossip columnist?
Well, you're looking at it.
Aren't you always?
You're looking at it.
It's like a cop. Aren't you always a cop?
When's the last time I wrote anything celebrity gossip related?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we should petition Coco to write more. That's what I think. So let's cap this off. We are big fans of the movie.
We love it. Well, I give it an A.
You give it an A. I give it a 4 out of 5 because that's the way we do things.
That's a B. That's not.
No, not in my world.
Okay.
A 4 is like that's a really good.
Not like
grade.
a 4.5 out of 5.
No, I think that in order to get a 4.5 out of 5, there would have had to been like, I don't know, would have been maybe a nude scene or something like that. No, I can't really think of a reason why it wouldn't be 4.5 out of 5 because it was really good.
It was very good. We at the end of it, the lights came up and we were both just like, OMG,
Yeah.
we loved it.
Yeah. And 1 out of 2 of my offspring liked it a lot too. So
The other one fell asleep.
yes, but that was because of the monkey scene. The monkey scene sort of scared her a little bit. And
Which, speaking of muffled, thank goodness that was muffled.
and also that's an important point before we go is that this movie is not gross. And
No.
it's not gory. It's not. There's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it's very subtle.
Right.
And there's turning of corpses in directions so that you don't like. That was one of the things that I liked about this movie too. Is it wasn't Ridley Scott's Alien where you see things happen and then the camera just lingers there.
Right.
It's very subtle. The camera sort of moves across things and you have to glean.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's the car chase on the moon and the guy gets shot, you don't see blood splurting everywhere and like an impossible limb getting blown off or anything like that.
Right.
Like
Brad Pitt just takes his body and throws it off the thing and they keep going.
He jumps into the cockpit. So like very well done. So anyway, I could talk on and on about this movie as you probably can tell from this podcast.
I will say though that it disheartens me that in the near future humanity is just as effed up as it is now between the experimentations on animals in space and the second you land on the moon, here's a subway, here's like an Enterprise Rena module, like. And
that was an homage to the Running Man. Like there was a lot of stuff in there as well that was like, oh, we're in the future, but it's really a lot like present.
Right. Like we're still like humanity is just programmed to just F everything up, just exploit it, screw it up.
And consumerism will never die.
And, no matter how many other planets we colonize, we're going to F them up too. So
right. We're going to take our effing up to new places, new worlds.
This is a very bleak note to end the podcast on.
Oh, and they're playing us out again with the music. So that's
so on that note,
the producers are like, all right, get off the stage.
Sorry, folks. Wally World is closed.
Well, that should be our end. That should be our end every time.
Okay, I'll do it.
So for another week on the podcast, thanks for joining us. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dolls.